If you are a thought leader, a business owner, and or a leader, and you struggle with doubting yourself, doubting your capabilities, doubting everything that you're doing, this video, this podcast, this live stream is just for you and you and you and you and you. My name is Terryl Humphrey, and welcome to the Phase Knowledge Podcast. And in this episode, we're gonna speak about how eliminating self-doubt will help you build the confidence, the skills, and the education that will help you grow and exceed in your life. Many times in life, you have to really understand that self-doubt comes from not understanding what you are doing. I remember getting into business, really learning the business language, trying to make sales, trying to make some revenue, trying to make some money, and it was like, well, there's something that I'm lacking. The thing that I was lacking was that I didn't understand business. And I thought self-doubt was something that just naturally came. Well, in reality, what I started to learn based off my journey and everything that I've learned so far, self-doubt comes when I'm not educated. Self-doubt comes when I don't understand. Self-doubt comes when I don't have a full understanding of what I'm doing. When I started to learn what I was doing, how to do it, and how to speak to other people, my confidence exceeded the doubt because the doubt is no longer here. So make sure you got your pen, make sure you got your notebook, because we are talking about the elimination of self-doubt and how this can help you become a better thought leader in your career, your business, and everything that you're doing. So point number one is the reason why self-doubt is the lack of education. Education. And you can't even see that. Hold on, you can't even see that. The lack of education is, I'm not saying everyone has to go to college. When I was in the Marine Corps, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, how to go about doing it. Before I joined the Marine Corps, I went to college, but I went to college for something that I didn't really enjoy. And it was there's a thing called kinesiology. In other words, physical therapy. And what I didn't recognize when I started going to school, I'm like, man, this is a lot of science classes that I have to take, and I'm not really prepared or willing to study everything around science. So I stopped going to college. And so then I started to work, trying to figure out everything. So prior to the service, I was trying to figure it out. I was trying to get the education. I was trying to develop the skills, the know-how, and the confidence, but the doubt came from not understanding what I was doing. It was a lack of education because the education that I had was very little, very minimal. And it got to a point where it's like, well, what can I do with this knowledge that I have? It's not the fact that I was uneducated. It's just that I wasn't educated in the right space. As I was working at Walmart, I was a cashier. And as I was a cashier, I went from a cashier to car pusher to electronic associate and then to produce associate. The reason why I'm sharing that is because I gained the education from different departments. Different departments do different things, yet they do the same exact thing. Education is not saying that you have to go to college. Education is saying that you have to have a willing to learn. That's what I want to pick on from the lack of education is the willingness to learn. Willingness to learn. And what does that have to do with business or being a thought leader? Well, it has everything to do with being a business owner, a leader, and entrepreneur, because you have to be okay with learning. You have to, you can't even see that. Hold on. You have to be okay with having the desire to become better. I had the desire to become better because although Walmart is a big corporation, there's multiple different positions that's inside of it. You have, let's just say right here, you have the cashier. Let's just say right here, you have the car pusher. Let's just say right here, you have the electronics. And then let's just say right here, you got produce. Right here right here, all the way down to produce, I had the willingness to learn. I had the willingness to learn and to really understand what I was doing, because to eliminate self-doubt, you have to be okay with learning what you are doing and why that's important. I started to understand if I want to do something, I have to become more educated around it. If I want to learn something, I have to go to the people that's currently doing it. If I want to get into business, I have to be around people who are already doing business. Why? Because I have to separate the information that I have based off the information that I would like to have. Because if I'm understanding or learning more about business, I'm becoming a better business owner. How this helps me is that I'm understanding that self-doubt exists because I lack the education. In other words, I lack the skill to build the confidence up to really understand what I'm doing. It's not the fact that everything doesn't make sense. It's more so than anything is understanding that the right information would change your life. When I was in the service, I start to really learn more about real estate. I got into real estate. And when I got into real estate, I was like, all right, cool. My goal here is to get into real estate. The book that I read that got me interested into reading was into real estate was The Rich Dad, Poor Dad. When I read this book, it was a form of education. When I read this book, it gave me a new perspective. When I read this book, it taught me something that I wasn't prepared to learn. It taught me that one, that it talked a lot about assets, liabilities, and things of that nature. But what my takeaway from it was that you have two different perspectives. You have one way of thinking, then you have another way of thinking. Either way is not wrong. However, if you want to go from one side to the next, you have to learn from the side that you want like to get on. Hold on. I remember, let's just say Rich Dad. Let's just say right here, Rich Dad. And then let's just say over here is Poor Dad. And Rich Dad, Poor Dad, that's what they talk about, is that you have two different sides. One think one way, let's go put a plus and in parentheses positive. And let's just say on this side, they think negative. Okay, they think negative thoughts. Let's just put negative. And what this is an example of is identifying the side that you like to be on. Would you like to be on the negative side? The negative side is not having negative thoughts. Nothing will work in my favor. Nothing will work for me. I can't learn this new skill. Or would you be on the positive side, the optimistic side, that say, eventually I will learn this information. Eventually I will understand this information. Eventually I will be able to apply this information. There's two different sides. And in the book, it gave two different perspectives. And the perspective that I received from it, I'm like, ooh, I want to be on the positive side because I'm very optimistic. In fact, one of my social media handles back in the day was Bullish T. Not the word that you're thinking, but Bullish T. Bullish is a synonym of optimism. I'm very optimistic. Like I plan for the future. I think ahead. I did a podcast yesterday talking about your future. Like you have to plan for things that you don't see. In order for you to plan for things that you don't see, you have to be optimistic. So the positive is optimistic, and the negative is what's the opposite of optimistic? Pessimistic, like PSSIMI. Like you only plan for today, and it's like you plan for today, and only the today matters. When I started to see the shift within myself, When I started to see the shift within myself, I got more educated. It wasn't the fact that I had lack of education. It was more so I didn't have the right education. A book changed my life. A book gave me a different perspective. A book taught me the importance of reading. Now, however, that despite me being in school for so long, I went to high school, graduated, and when I went to school, I was just going to school just so I could play football. I didn't really have the desire to learn. I just did the work. As I get older, the desire to learn has to be top of mind. Why? Because if I'm not willing to learn the information, the education will be lacking. It will be lacking inside me because now I have to understand, like, well, what am I doing? What is the purpose of this? Doubt exists when Education is not present. It's not present. And when I started to get educated on the path that I'm on the business that I'm building, on the problem that I'm solving, I'm like, well, how can I continue to learn about the problem that I'm solving? It's not just necessarily about real estate. It's more so about having a different perspective about the information that you're receiving. There's tons of knowledge out there. You got social media, you got TikTok, you got Live, you got Twitch, you got YouTube, you got all these different platforms. Yeah, at the same time, it doesn't matter the information that you get, the education that you receive from. What matters is that you are seeking the knowledge. You have to be the ones that seek the knowledge because the education is there for you. You don't have to go to college. You don't have to go to these different programs. But what I started to do was go and read different books. There's a library that offer free books, but I'll tell you, it wasn't the books that got me interested. It was the perspective that got me engaged. I want to be educated on why a lot of people are successful. I'm thinking people who are successful ain't never failed before. When I started The Failure Knowledge Podcast, I started to learn that was a myth. It was a myth because you're not at the top because you didn't go through didn't go through a phase of life. You're at the top because you had to pivot after pivot after pivot. In other words, you have failure after failure after failure. It's not the fact that the failure stopped you. It's more so that the failure encouraged you to grow even more. In business, education has to be the top priority. Self-doubt exists because there's a lack of education. I'm not saying that education is a lack of degree. No. It's a lack of perspective. It's a lack of change. It's a lack of thought of the way you think. It's understanding that you can get educated and you just don't have to go the traditional way. You don't have to go to college. Absolutely not. They got YouTube. You know how many people come online and educate? Finding the topic that you want to learn about will help you become better because it's building your confidence. The lack of education is not bad. It's getting the right information that will help change your perspective. As your perspective changes, you change. As you change, you develop. As you develop, you become more confident. I start to get more confident behind the business that I've been trying to build for the last half a decade. And yesterday I had a breakthrough. It was like, oh, this is it right here. Like, this is what I was looking for. Let me know in the comments if you agree with what I'm talking about. Let me know in the comments. Let me know where y'all chiming in from. I was like, this is it. This is what I'm looking for. The thing that I was looking for was that I'm thinking that just because I have a podcast production company, I have to do everything. I have to help thought leaders record, edit, publish, and do all these different things. But I'm like, wait, no. If I'm offering everything, I'm not going to have a sustainable business. However, if I learn how to solve a problem, the problem that I'm solving should be the main focus. How do I know how to solve a problem? It has to be the focus based on the education that I received over the last half a decade. The problem that you solve is the problem that you solve for yourself. And that's crazy because I literally been trying to figure out what problem I've been solving, what solution I can present, and it's literally the same exact problem that I've been solving for myself. Listen. Education does not stop happening. What happens is that you get an epiphany. I just had an epiphany. Like an epiphany is a thought that came across your mind that makes a lot of sense. It makes sense now on the problem that I'm trying to solve because it was the problem that I was trying to solve for myself. In business, what I'm learning, when you go into business for yourself, I did a podcast yesterday, and we talked about how whenever you go to a different program, you are buying their system. You're buying their system because it's something that works for them. When you apply their system to your business, it should work if you do everything right. However, you have to develop your own system that works for you that you can sell to other people. And I was like, what the mess? This whole entire time, I've been trying to figure out what problem I've been solving, and I just missed the problem that I was experiencing because it feels second nature. I can do it with my eyes closed and don't have to worry about trying to figure out how to solve the problem that I currently have. The problem that I currently have is editing and publishing podcasts consistently. I solved that problem. When I was able to solve that problem, I saw changes. the education that I had, in other words, the perspective that I had, gave me a new outlook on the business I'm developing. Why? Because I started to understand the problem that I have. And when I started to understand the problem that I have, I'm like, all right, cool. How do I put myself out there even more? How will I be able to help others, to help thought leaders, not only put themselves out there, but to really do it consistently? Oh, you got to have a system. Hold on. Oh, you got to have a blueprint. You got to have a system. You got to have, let's bring it down here, a process. Too many S's. You got to have a process. Why? Because the process is what matters. When you change what you are learning, you gain the perspective to help you grow. When you grow, you are developing. When you develop, you are becoming educated. As you get educated, you start to shift your perspective. Negative perspectives exist because there's a lack of education. The lack of education, it goes into the shift of gaining a better understanding of what you are doing. The Rich Dad Poor Dad book by Robert Kiyosaki is a book that talks about perspective. I thought it was a book that talked about real estate. In reality, it's a book that talks about perspective. It's not necessarily saying a rich dad, poor dad. It's saying a different perspective. Yes, he had his own dad. His dad was the one who was working 9 to 5, but and the other dad was the one who had his own business. It's not the fact. It's not more so of their occupation, of their job. It's how they thought about life. It's how they thought about success. It's how they thought about education. Let me tell you something. Hold on. Let me tell you something real quick. That gave me confidence to know that I can get educated, not just going to school, but reading different books, watching YouTube videos, and applying the information. That's the next one I want to hit on. Is that as you read the books, as you watch the videos, as you watch the training, you have to, point number 2, apply the information. You have to apply the information. Why do you have to apply the information? I'll tell you this. When I started to go to school for business management, the information that they gave around business was crazy. Like, it was so overwhelming. I'm like, man, how can I apply that to what I'm doing? What do I need to learn? How can I apply that today? And it's not the fact that the information was overwhelming. It's more so that you have to identify what works for you. When I started to learn what works for the podcast business, the podcast production business of helping thought leaders edit and publish their podcasts, I'm like, what do I need to do? First, I need to learn sales, okay? First, I need to learn sales. Then, I need to learn marketing. Then, I need to learn operations. Then, I need to learn finances. Then I need to learn leadership. And as I continue to learn all these different information that goes into business, I'm like, man, this is a lot. How do I apply that? It wasn't the fact that the information wasn't good. It's not good. It's just that the education that's presented is a lot. So how can I be able to position myself differently so that way I can really help thought leaders edit and publish their podcast consistently? Sales is not my strong suit. However, I understand sales has to be a focus, because if I want to start making money or making revenue or helping more people, I have to learn how to sell. As I learn how to sell, as I continue to learn how to sell, there's an education factor that has to be in consideration. It has to be consistent. It has to be daily, and you have to do it every single day. The thing about learning the education and applying the education is that the learning is me remembering certain words, certain quotes, certain terminology. The application, me actually doing it, is me applying the terminology, me applying the information, me applying the education. Why? Because I have to learn how to act on what I just learned. In the Marine Corps, even in boot camp, we had classes. And by classes, I'm saying every day we was learning something. Every day we learned something, we went out and applied the information that we just learned. Why? Because it resonates more when you are able to do the work. The work has to be done in order for you to apply the information. Once you receive the information, you have to apply what you just learned. I've been applying the education that I've been learning over half a decade, and I see the shift because I'm becoming a better business owner. I recognize the shift because the shift is changing my perspective. I recognize that the education around business never ends. In addition to that, it has to be on a consistent basis. What this does for me is that it helped me become a better business owner. I can't be a better business owner if I'm not applying the information. In 2022, I read 22 books about real estate, and I only closed one transaction within 18 months. If I would have continued to do real estate, I probably would have closed more deals. If I would have continued to apply the information that was inside the books, I probably would have closed more deals. If I would have been consistent with the education that I received, I probably would have closed. I probably made more money. But the challenge that came from that was learning how to apply the information that was in the books. Because it was the same books. It was the same information, but just different books. And just because it's different books doesn't mean that the information does not apply. And I'm like, oh man, that's crazy. I wouldn't even thought. When you apply the information, you have to learn everything that goes into your business. You have to learn sales. You have to learn marketing. You have to learn operation. You have to learn financing. You have to learn leadership. You have to learn, I forgot this one, team development. Team development. So you got to learn all these different things. In fact, I'm still learning everything. I'm not at the point where I understand everything. However, I'm getting to a point where I'm more educated, and as I'm applying the knowledge, it starts to make sense. It makes sense because it's no longer a confused terminology. It makes sense because it's no longer a confused language. It makes sense because I apply what I have recently learned. That gives me the advantage. It's not just about having doubt. Yes. What did I say? Hold on. Eliminate self-doubt. To eliminate self-doubt, you have to start with educating yourself. As you educate yourself, you have to be okay with applying the information, because the information that's not applied would not stick. The information that's not applied would not make sense. The information that's not applied would just be information that you have gathered for yourself. And when I started to see the shift within the way I was thinking, the way I was communicating, the way I was accomplishing the education I would like to receive, I started to see a shift. The shift that I had was from lack of education to getting educated by me applying the information. Now I got experience. Now I have different lessons. Now I have different outcomes. When I had my first couple of sales calls, it was not great. However, now as I continue to go on, let's just say I have a discovery call and somebody will get onto the podcast. I learn more about their business, their story, and the goal that they look to get from the podcast. I introduce to them about phase knowledge, the history, and in addition to that, I share with them, okay, cool, you're going to receive the backstory of the phase knowledge podcast, you're going to see the format of it. Then the questions that I receive is, are you going to send the questions for the interview? I said, I'm not going to send the questions, however, I'm going to send the format. The format is what gets sent out to everybody because the format is the same. In addition to that, the questions will be different based off your experience, based off my research, and based off your education. Why? Because every interview has a unique perspective to it. Every successful business owner that I've spoken with, they failed. They had trial and error. They went through different moments within their journey. yet they didn't give up and they found a way to push through. When you apply the information, you are pushing through to understand what you are doing. As you understand what you are doing, you are becoming more educated. So to recap the last 2 points that we just talked about is that number one is there's a lack of education. You have to have a willingness to learn. The next point that we talked about was that you have to apply the information. You have to learn about sales, marketing, operations, finance, leadership, and team development. And the last thing that we are going to speak about today, hold on, let me come back to the camera for this one, is seek mentors. Mentors are the people who are, who will accomplish what you are looking to achieve. Accomplish or looking to achieve. I'm going to underline that one. Why? Because mentors, what I started to learn, and hold on, I didn't even recognize I learned this when I was playing football, but as I was playing football in high school, the coaches was a form of mentors. They was teaching the players how to play their position, how to focus on the small details, how to improve, how to get stronger, how to diet their food or diet their body, how to train, how to behave, how to show up on time, how to be disciplined. They were a form of mentors. They were a mentor to us because it was teaching us the way. Just like teachers teach the way. Teachers not only educate the students, but the teachers are a form of mentors. When you go, I recognize that your parents I learned that your parents can even be mentors. And I didn't, for some reason, it didn't register, but I'm like, your parents can be your mentor? They said, yeah. I'm like, what? That's crazy. They said your parents can be a mentor because they are older than you. In addition to that, they have accomplished things that you are looking to achieve. Why is that important? To work with a mentor, to get around a mentor that will help you see things that's not familiar. I recognized this the other day. I was like, mentors are really important. I was like, why is it important though? Mentors help you gain clarity behind the doubt that you have within yourself. That made sense. I'm like, hold on. To eliminate self-doubt, you have to get around mentors who don't doubt themselves in the thing that you are looking to do. Everyone struggles at some point in time, but it's understanding that you can go and seek help. You can go and ask for help. You can go and seek guidance. And when you do that, you get around people who have accomplished what you are looking to achieve. When you do this, hold on. It's kind of like when I was in school, you have to be okay. Let's just say this is a desk. I'm sitting right here. This right here is another student. And the teacher is right here. And they say, do you have any questions? Do you have any questions? Why is that important? A mentor cares about your journey. When they care about your journey, you can ask questions. I hate this saying to say, what is it? What is it saying? There's no such thing as a dumb question. Is that the saying? There's no such thing as a dumb question. I think that's the saying. Hold on. I think that's the saying, if I'm not mistaken. There's no such thing as a dumb question. And I get the concept of it. But when you say that, it has a negative connotation behind it. It's like there's no such thing as a dumb question. Like, what does that even mean? So my question was dumb to begin with? What the best? And when I when I gained a better understanding of it, it was saying, don't be afraid to ask questions, because the question that you have, other people might have the same exact question. There's no such thing as a dumb question, because your question matters. I said, ooh, hold on. Your question matters. So you have to get around mentors, people, educators, teachers who will answer your question with confidence, not just from a book, not just from resources, not just from citation, from actual experience. They can tie the book information, the book education, the resource into the answer, so that way you can have some context around what they are presenting. Nonetheless, you can't be afraid to ask questions, because the question that you're asking is helping you get educated. There's a thing that's going around that a lot of people are afraid to ask questions, because a lot of people are afraid to be judged. And I understand why, because you don't want to come off as uneducated. It's not the fact that you're coming off uneducated. It's more so, hold on. Let me come back to the screen. Hold on. It's not the fact that you're uneducated. It's more so that you doubt the question that you're asking. To eliminate self-doubt, you have to get around mentors that encourage feedback, that encourage your questions, that encourage you to raise your hand and ask a question, even though it has been asked multiple different times. What this does is that it shows a willingness to learn. The more questions you ask, and this comes from a person who asks a lot of questions. Hold on. The more questions you ask, the more you learn. The more questions you ask, the more you learn. I go to school, and as I'm in school, I ask a lot of questions. Now, some of my classmates, they be like, Terryl, man, you ask a lot of questions. And I say, because I want to learn. You can't be afraid to ask questions, because the questions that you are asking, you are becoming more educated. I started to learn. I was like, to eliminate self-doubt, you have to be okay with raising your hand. To eliminate self-doubt, you have to be okay with asking questions. To eliminate self-doubts, you have to ask the question that you don't know the answer to. Why? Because when you seek mentors are there to guide you. Mentors are there to answer your questions. Mentors are there to eliminate self-doubt. Self-doubt exists. And it exists because of the lack of information, because of the lack of education, because of the lack of experience. When I started to get into business, I'm like, man, I don't have as much experience as everybody else. When I got into the podcast production business, in fact, I didn't even know it's called podcast production. I was just doing podcast episodes. I was having a conversation, and I didn't recognize the business that I was in. As I got around people who are currently doing business, I started to see a shift. Hold on. The shift that I saw was that I was learning the perspective of becoming a better business owner. To be a better business owner, I have to be okay with asking questions. When you seek mentors, the mentor is going to put you in a better mind space, because now you don't have to think about everything that you have to do, because you can go to the source. You can go to the mentor. You can go and get educated. The more questions you ask, the more you become educated. Hold on. So to recap, what we just talked about on how to eliminate self-doubt is that, number one, self-doubt comes from lack of education. And when you have lack of education, you have to have the willingness to learn. The next point that we talked about is that you have to apply the information. There's a lot of information that goes into business where you have to learn about sales, marketing, operations, finances, leadership, and team development. But you have to be okay with learning the information one step at a time. So that way, as you're learning the information, you apply the information. The application of the information is so critical to your success, because this is how you get educated and more confident. Point number 3, seek mentors. Seek mentors. There are people out there who have more experience than you, and they'll be willing to help you if you go out and ask the right questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions, because the questions you ask will be the answers you're looking for. So that's what we talked about today. Let me know your biggest takeaway on the importance of eliminating self-doubt, and let me know in the comments your biggest takeaway. Before we end, I want to end with this one thing. Don't be afraid to fail, because failure will help you gain the knowledge while you become educated. I appreciate y'all. Let me know your biggest takeaway from the how to eliminate self-doubt. And by the way, hit that follow and subscribe so that way you can continue to develop within yourself. I appreciate y'all. Hold on. I appreciate y'all, and I'll see y'all in the next one.